Well, hello, everyone who will be watching today's recording. Before we begin today's forum, I want to take a few moments to introduce myself and to thank both of our candidates who will be here today. Today, we'll be joined by Representative Patti Minter of House District 20, which represents parts of Warren County, Kentucky. We'll also be joined later on in the forum by candidate Kevin Jackson, who is also vying for that House District 20 seat in the Kentucky House of Representatives. Before we go much further, my name is Benjamin Geese, and I am Director of Early Childhood Policy and Practice for the Pritchard Committee. At the Pritchard Committee, we strive to ensure a big, bold future for all Kentuckians. And while we know that the path to a larger life begins with a quality education for all, birth through post-secondary, we also understand the power of civic engagement. Strong civic engagement is a key ingredient in a healthy society. One of the ways civic engagement is measured is by voter turnout. And at the Pritchard Committee, we track voter turnout as one of 13 metrics in our Big Bold Future National Rankings Report to measure citizen engagement. You will hear Pritchard's Big Bold Future report referenced throughout today's forum. The report is used to measure Kentucky's progress on educational and quality of life outcomes and ranks Kentucky's progress in relation to other states. The report is a helpful guide in determining where our Commonwealth is excelling and where Kentucky needs more help in putting all citizens on the path to a larger life. By conducting several candidate forums in the build-up to the general election this November, our hope is to see more Kentuckians become engaged, informed citizens and to exercise their right to vote. In the words of our President and CEO, Bridget Blom, engaged communities with families and children at the center are vital to improving education in Kentucky. The Pritchard Committee is a nonpartisan, non-governmental organization, and as such, we do not endorse candidates. However, we do promote strong civic engagement in candidate education. Please remember that these forums are recorded and made available to the general public via the Pritchard Committee website, social media, and to members of the local media. Lastly, as a reminder, to ensure fairness, each candidate is given equal time and identical questions to respond to. But for now, let's welcome Representative Minter of House District 20. Welcome, Rep. Minter.
Thank you very much, Ben. It is a pleasure to be with you and Bridget today, and I appreciate so much working with the Pritchard Committee, which I've done not only in my last 4 years as the representative from House District 20 here in Bowling Green, but also when I was faculty regent. I served as faculty regent for 7 years on WKU's Board of Regents and worked with you in the higher ed capacity as well. So thank you so much for having this forum, which is a great way for people to understand where candidates stand and to promote democracy.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Representative Minter. We appreciate your work past, present, and look forward to seeing how your work will continue to evolve into the future.
Thank you.
So to get started today, we'd like to get to know our candidates and their positions, certainly, but we also like to get to know our candidates as people first. So in getting to understand you as a person, we're really interested to know really what made you enter this call of public service. And is there a leader that you admire and you hope to exemplify in your work in Frankfort?
Well, thank you so much for that question. My first time going to Frankfort as a citizen lobbyist was in 2008 when I went with then WKU President Gary Ransdell to see then Speaker of the House Jody Richards, who was my representative and whose seat I am now very honored to hold. And Representative Richards was an advocate for education second to none. And we were lobbying him for higher education and lobbying him for the creation of what became the Gatton Academy of Math and Sciences here, but mostly lobbying for higher education. And I spent 2 days going from office to office, meeting with people and seeing how the process worked. And I saw how having an education advocate in the speaker's chair made such a difference. And I could point to a million things in Bowling Green's House District 20 that Speaker Richards has done from his being one of the fathers of CARA to the driving force behind the Gatton Academy, all of the things he did for WKU, all of the things he did for K-12 education. And I watched and I learned. And that is my major reason for going into public service. I also learned as a regent, as a faculty regent, you are not just a voting member of a board, but you are an advocate not only for the faculty you represent, but for all of the staff and the students at WKU. And people came to me with their problems. They shared their concerns, their joys, their pains. And I loved being an advocate for them. I loved giving them voice and making them feel empowered when sometimes they didn't feel empowered. So I think all of these things are big parts of the reason that I stood for election in 2018 to succeed an extraordinary education representative, Jody Richards. And I am continuing that work every time I set foot in the Capitol.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for that answer.
Yeah.
No doubt in your work at the Capitol and in your work at Western Kentucky University, I'm sure there are days where you encounter many opportunities and also days in which you encounter many challenges.
Yes.
And we know that's the same for all of Kentucky's students. We also know that what happens beyond the classroom has a big impact on educational outcomes. We like to say that kids don't grow up in silos, that poverty will affect health, health will affect education, education will affect safety, and so on and so forth. And so as you think about all of the issues surrounding Kentucky students, what is your particular interest? And what's the area around students, families, and education you are interested in? And how do you hope to become the leader in Frankfort on that issue?
Oh, there are a lot of really important questions there. So let me take those apart. First, House District 20 has, as redistricted, has some of the poorest residents of our county and some of the wealthiest, and has everybody in between. I represent two school systems, Bowling Green Independent and Warren County Public Schools. I have Western Kentucky University in my district. I have Sky CTC in my district, and numerous child cares as well. And I hope we'll have an opportunity to talk about the importance of early childhood education in this conversation as well. But when I ran in 2018, teachers were under siege and their pensions were being threatened. They were being vilified by a governor and the General Assembly. And I've taught for 29 years at WKU. I'm proud to be a member of KTRS. And I know that pension promises have to be kept. And I know that since I've been in Frankfort, while the attacks on teachers have dialed back to a point, we are continuing to underfund schools. We have funded them more this year, but we're still not funding schools enough. We are hemorrhaging teachers, and really, we need to apply a tourniquet. It's getting that bad. And teachers do not feel supported or respected. My constituents who are teachers tell me that. I voted against a bill that took new teachers off of defined benefit pension programs and moved them into a defined contribution 401 style K program. That over time will have they'll have 20% less retirement income than someone in KTRS now would have. That's not right. That's not right. We need to pay teachers better. I was one of many people on the floor who asked why in our budget that gave much deserved raises to state employees across the board, why were teachers left out of that? Why were teachers left out of that? And it sent it back to local school boards where they have to make tough decisions about giving raises or paying for other things that the school system needs. And that's not right. So we need to make sure, if we say that education is our priority and it is the lifeblood that creates an educated citizenry in a workforce, then we have to put our money where our mouth is. So I will continue as the representative from House District 20 to do what my constituents have asked me to do, to stand up and show up for education funding, to put that funding in base budget, to make sure that teachers are properly compensated for the work they do, or they're going to go do something else. And finally, to make sure that people have the promise of a dignified retirement when their work is finished. And certainly we see the same thing in higher education, where we are asked to do more and more in promoting workforce development and producing people who are trained to go into the workforce. We're getting lots of new jobs in Bowling Green in the next couple of years, high skill jobs that have major educational needs. But SCI-CTC and WKU need more funding than the General Assembly has given them in order to educate these students and prepare them for the challenges of a next level 21st century workforce. So those are some of the major priorities right now. We need to make sure that when we say education matters, that we put that money behind it. And that means permanent base budget funding, not one-time money, not grabbing money that came from the federal government, from ARPA. That's good. It's been a windfall for which I'm exceptionally grateful, but only putting things into the base budget will ensure their success and longevity over time.
Well, thank you so much for that answer. And it's a perfect segue to our next set of interview questions regarding funding, in particular funding education at the State House. Mm-hmm. 2 years ago, the Pritchard Committee unveiled a 6-year plan to add $1 billion annually to the state's education budget in strategic areas where that investment could be measured for impact. Mm-hmm. We called it the Big Bold Ask.
Yes.
And in the first 2 budget years of that plan, major investments were made in the areas of full-day kindergarten, broadband internet access, early literacy, and Kentucky's state university system. The remaining components, or those things on our to-do list, include needed investments in childcare, in preschool, and in a fund for teaching excellence. You mentioned early childhood earlier, and that's something that we are very much excited about at the Pritchard Committee. And recently, we and a team of statewide partners released a Fragile Ecosystem 4. Will Kentucky childcare survive when the dollars run out? A Fragile Ecosystem 4, a survey completed by over 500 of Kentucky's approximately 1,600 childcare providers, and from 95 out of 120 Kentucky counties, found that once current federal American Rescue Plan dollars run out, over 70% of childcare providers said they'd be forced to raise tuition. Close to 30% of childcare providers said they would lay off staff, and 20% of providers said they would close their doors permanently. Mm-hmm. And currently, only about half of all Kentucky children arrive to kindergarten prepared, and Kentucky ranks 41st in the nation in the number of 3- and 4-year-olds in preschool, which is a fall from 28th in the nation just back in 2008. So with all of those facts and figures in mind, here's our question. How can Kentucky ensure more children access high-quality early learning?
Well, it's a crucial question, and it's something that I've been concerned about as a mom myself. My child is now in high school, but finding full-time childcare for him and finding childcare that could provide for him once he had onset of type 1 diabetes at 19 months was a Herculean challenge. And we found it here in Bowling Green at WKU Child Care Centers. And I'm very grateful for the work that they did. But everyone should have the opportunity to have access to high quality childcare at an affordable price, the way that we did. And there's really only one way to do it. You're absolutely correct that while ARPA money has been a lifeline for us, it is a benefits cliff. And the money's running out and we're going to fall off. How do we stop that from happening? We have to make sure that we make sure our budget is a statement of our values. And for me, making sure, if we want to talk about how do we get people back into the workforce, which I hear all the time, well, we have to make sure that half of the population can get back into the workforce. Moms need childcare, part-time and full-time, and they need affordable, high-quality childcare to make sure that they can go back. So it's up to the General Assembly to fund that. And this is one of those things that while we're making an investment on the front end, it pays off massive dividends, as you pointed out from the excellent study that you all have done. It pays off massive dividends in the future of the Commonwealth. Education is about planting seeds and watching them grow. And sometimes we don't know how those flowers look until they're 21 or 22. But I know that by investing right now in high quality, accessible early childhood education, we will see women going back into the workforce, which helps the family's bottom line. We will see children developing the social and emotional skills that will have them ready for kindergarten and ready to go into first grade, and that will build throughout their time in K-12 education. We will see that children are safe, again, that they are food secure, because that's another benefits cliff that we're falling off, the end of free lunch for children in public schools. We have lots of kids who are not as well fed as they were because they're being allowed to fall off the benefits cliff. And I will always vote to support nutrition for children, access to early childhood education, and funding it in a way that is sustainable in an ongoing way. The General Assembly took a step toward that this year with a bill that supported early childhood education, but we need to take the next step, which is funding it universally. And that doesn't force anybody into childcare who doesn't want to send their children there. It takes away no parental choice, but it provides that much needed lifeline for working parents who want to be in the workforce. And again, it's going to pay off so many dividends when children go into classrooms in kindergarten and first grade and second grade. They'll be ready to learn. And we have a moral obligation to the future of this Commonwealth and to our children to fund that fully.
Well, thank you so much for that answer. We certainly appreciate it. There's something that I'd like to loop back to that you mentioned earlier in your comments around Kentucky's teachers.
Yes.
Nationally, we hear a lot about teacher shortages.
Yes.
And even before the pandemic, we saw a decline in the number of young people interested in enrolling in our university's teacher preparation programs.
Yes.
And even those who had earned those credentials opting for a career outside of the classroom. I know you've already commented on things like pension funding, for example, making teaching a more lucrative career. But aside from those very, very important angles, how can state leaders work to ensure that Kentucky's best and brightest both remain in and choose to enter the teaching profession? And what are some steps that Kentucky can take to ensure quality teachers are in each and every Kentucky classroom?
Well, that's a great question. And let me unpack that in reverse. I live very close to the Tennessee line, and Tennessee pays their teachers better. I have constituents who commute every day from Bowling Green. We have lots of wonderful schools here, but I have constituents who commute to Tennessee public school systems every day. And we have bad roads and traffic once you get across the Tennessee line, and they still do it because they're paid better. They have a defined benefit pension, they're compensated better, and there are more people in the schools. In other words, the ratios are better, the support staff is better. And this is something that we could fix right now. We need to fund employee lines. We need to give school systems money so they can fund employee lines, hire aides as needed, fully staff as needed. Every teacher that I talk to tells me how tired they are and stressed they are and overworked. And we're seeing so many people retiring the minute they become eligible because they just can't take it. And again, why should anybody go into teaching if they know that they are not valued, that their pension that will not be a defined benefit pension? It'll be worth 20% less than their more senior colleagues. We need to reverse these bad anti-teacher policies right now and recognize, again, that budgets are statements of values. And if we want our children to get the best education possible, we need to make sure that we show the teachers, not just tell them how important they are. We need to show them every day how important they are through compensating them adequately and competitively to our neighboring states. To the other point that you made, as someone who trains teachers, we have to make sure that we fund higher education as well. We need to make sure that our teacher training programs have good funding, have appropriate staffing, and prepare people for the road ahead in all of these classrooms. And this is within our grasp. We just have to decide we're going to allocate the money to do that. And I've been an advocate for this since I became the state representative 4 years ago, and I'll continue to lift that message up as long as I'm in Frankfort.
Well, thank you so much for that answer.
Yeah.
You know, when we think about the quality of Kentucky's education, certainly the quality of a teacher is paramount.
Yes.
But also important is the quality and the quality and the rigor of the curriculum.
Yes.
And so when we think about Kentucky's high school diploma, for example, you know, that should be evidence that a student is ready to succeed after high school. But unfortunately, too many students today graduate diploma in hand without having mastered the knowledge and skills required to be successful in college, career, and life. The Pritchard Committee community profiles for all school districts show the state graduation rate in 2021, for example, at 90%. However, the state rate for meeting college readiness benchmarks in a subject like math is at 30%. And despite Kentucky ranking 3rd in the nation in high school graduation, Kentucky ranks 44th in the nation in higher education attainment and in median household income. So here's our question. How can Kentucky ensure both rigorous, meaningful coursework and provide the support students need to successfully transition to their life post-high school?
Mm-hmm. Those are all excellent questions. And again, there are some things that can be solved by putting your values into action and writing the funding into the budget. There are some fields such as math, and as someone who teaches history, I train social studies teachers, and we know that the best way to teach students how to write is to have them do lots of writing assignments. But if you have too many students in a classroom, you don't have aides, you're not supported, it's difficult to do as many assignments. So that's something that we need to work on. Math may require a lower student to faculty ratio, and certainly at different ability levels, that's true. And we need to recognize that, and we need to fund that. Again, there's no substitute for trying to close achievement gaps and differences in college readiness. There's no substitute for making sure that teachers have the time and have the support to prepare those students. Again, people are telling me they're tearing their hair out and saying, I just don't have the support. I don't have the resources that I need. I can't do it all. That's what we're hearing. And we need to listen to teachers. We need to listen to the teachers at the university level that prepare our future teachers. And they say the same thing. So again, making sure that we have what I would say is a much overdue return to investment in education. When I was the faculty regent, the first meeting I went to of the board, we had just had a huge budget cut that slashed higher education's budgets and K-12 as well. We are only now, because of ARPA money, beginning to see those monies restored, but they're not fully restored yet. So we need to do that immediately and understand that none of these other outcomes that would prevent brain drain and get our students where they need to go for workforce and for college readiness, all of that comes by restoring the funding that has been taken for so long, getting us where we need to be, and then we can all move forward together.
Well, very good. Thank you for that answer. You know, today we've talked about students, we've talked about teachers, we've talked about curriculum. We're going to spend a little bit of time next talking about parents. You know, at the Pritchard Committee, we believe that a child's first, best, and most important teacher is their parent. So often we hear that parents feel left out of the education policy-making process. How can legislators work to engage parent voice earlier in the decision-making process?
That's an excellent question. And certainly there has been a turn away from that in Frankfurt with reducing the power and influence of, site-based councils that put parents and administrators together. I'd like to see that restored. I'd like to see that enlarged so that parents literally have a seat at the table and can be a part of the conversation. But I think that is something that, we talk out of two sides of our mouth sometimes. Sometimes people say parents need to have more of a voice, as they then propose bills that take those voices away. And I voted against those bills that would take parents' voices away. I know that I benefited from having parents who were active, not just in PTO, which was more of a fundraising organization, but from being on what was then a very new idea of site-based councils and being in conversation with the teachers and the administrators. And I think that is how we can help to engage people more. But we also have to recognize that we need to make sure that parents have the time to do this. By increasing funding for early childhood education, for example, we can get people back into the workforce so that families aren't struggling so much. If you're working 2 jobs, it's hard to be involved in your child's school because you're busy just trying to put food on the table. So we need to understand that those are real issues too that provide barriers. I want everyone to be able to have a seat at the table and be part of the conversation. And I'll support legislation that will move that forward.
Well, thank you so much. Believe it or not, we're already at our last question.
Okay.
And we want to be sure to give you the last word. So as you sit back, it's getting closer and closer to Election Day. Let's say there is a citizen in House District 20 who is showing up to the voting booth. And their main reason for being there is they want to elect a candidate who puts education for all ages, birth through post-secondary first. Why should that individual cast their vote for you?
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to make that closing statement. I am proud to be a product of the public schools and that my child is a product of Bowling Green House District 20's excellent public schools. I have taught for 29 years at a public university that I see daily uplifting the students I serve and the region into which they go into the workforce. I have been a member of WKU's governing board. I participated in citizen lobbying in the halls of government. I have worked with budgets that were millions of dollars. We made hard choices. We moved money around on the board, but I never, ever stopped being an advocate for the students I teach, the faculty and the staff I represented, and the promise that higher education gives to all Kentuckians. Now, as the representative from House District 20, I have listened to the students and the teachers that I represent, and I have lifted up their concerns. I have voted to put my values behind budgets that support those values. I want to make sure that we have a budget that reflects our values. Let's not just talk about education, let's actually fund it. And finally, let's move forward on the long overdue idea that we need to have fully funded pre-K in Kentucky to make sure that our children whose parents want them to have those opportunities so they get to kindergarten and they are ready to hit the ground running and that they never stop. That is how we support education. It's how we support our citizens. This is how we avoid brain drain. And this is how we make Kentucky a commonwealth for us all. So as a former regent and lifelong student of public schools, and as an educator for 29 years, I would be very honored to earn your votes for my reelection to continue advocating for you in the General Assembly. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much. This has been Representative Patti Minter of House District 20 in Bowling Green, Warren County. We want to thank her so much for her time today. As Representative Minter exits the forum, we'll be calling in next candidate Kevin Jackson. But again, thank you so much, Rep. Minter, for being here today.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much, Ben. Thank you, Bridget. And thank you for the outstanding advocacy work that Pritchard Committee does to make this a commonwealth for us all. Thank you so much. All right.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
You too. Thank you. Okay, and we should have candidate Jackson popping up here in just a moment. Hello, candidate Jackson. How are you today?
Hey, Ben, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
Well, we're certainly glad that you could make it. I know we're going to hop right into the questions here in just a moment. I have just a few reminders as we get started to those who will be watching the recording. Just a quick reminder that the Pritchard Committee is a nonpartisan, non-governmental organization. And as such, we do not endorse candidates. However, we do promote strong civic engagement in candidate education. Please also remember that these forums are recorded and will be made available to the public via the Pritchard Committee website, social media, and to the local press corps. We heard from Representative Mentor just moments ago. Now we will hear from candidate Kevin Jackson, who is also vying for the seat in House District 20. So welcome again, candidate Jackson. And we're going to hop right into the questions, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, we believe that it's important to get to know all candidates for office, first as people and second as candidates. And so as you reflect upon entering into this contest for the seat for House District 20 in the Kentucky House of Representatives, what was really that call that first made you enter public service? And is there a leader that you hope to exemplify should you come to represent House District 20?
Well, being public service has been a passion of mine my entire adult life. After graduating from Western Kentucky University, I spent 32 years in education as a teacher, a guidance counselor, assistant principal, coach. I'm in my fifth year, just started my fifth year on the Warren County School Board, and just started my fourth year on the Bowling Green Warren County Community Education Board as vice chairman of that organization. So I hope you can see from my adult experience that there's always been a passion there for public service. And I guess my parents were my biggest influences and role models. They taught me to treat everyone with respect, whether that was the janitor or the superintendent. You treat them the same. They gave me a work ethic that if you wanted to do anything in life, it started with a good work ethic. So I'm so thankful to have had the parents. They weren't highly educated people, but they knew common sense and they knew how to treat people. And they also were very involved with the community. They volunteered to their community. Mom was on the Warren County Library Board. She was a women's club. My dad was a 40-year person in the Lions Club. He was a city commissioner and a mayor of a small town here in Warren County. So I think they instilled in me at an early age what it meant to give back to your community and be a good public servant.
Well, thank you so much for that wonderful answer. It's always great to get to know candidates on a more personal level. So we certainly appreciate that. You know, as we think about students in Kentucky, we know that those students face many challenges, pardon me, but also many opportunities. We know that what happens beyond the classroom has a big impact on education outcomes. We like to say here that kids don't grow up in silos, that poverty will affect health, health will affect education, and so on and so forth. So candidate Jackson, as you think about all the issues surrounding Kentucky students, what is your particular interest? And is there an area around students, families, and education that you want to be recognized as the leader in Frankfort?
You know, that's a great question, and you can go down a lot of different paths, I think, with that opportunity. There's so many societal problems, I think, today, being that plays into our educational process as well. You know, whether that's student behavior, whether that's lack of motivation on the part of the student, whether it's lack of parental involvement. All of those, I think, are key factors that play into some of the problems that we're experiencing today. And I would like to be known as the person that can bring people together at the table in order to come up with some solutions for this. I don't have all the answers. I've been on the school board now, starting my 5th year, as I said, and every day I see something new that I hadn't even thought about. But the old coach in me wants to bring people together. You know, if we can steal from other states, from other communities, things that they're doing that are beneficial, that help their students, why can't we do the same thing here? So I guess my strong point would be bringing people together, using a common sense approach to figure out what we can do for this lack of motivation, for lack of parental involvement, for behavior problems that are causing some of our students not to be able to grasp what we're trying to offer them.
Well, thank you so much for that answer. You know, as we think about what's going on in Frankfurt, it's also important to reflect on what's happened in Frankfurt. Over 2 years ago, the Pritchard Committee unveiled a 6-year plan to add $1 billion annually to the state's education budget in strategic areas where that investment could be measured for impact. We called it the Big Bold Ask. Even with the impact of the pandemic, the General Assembly made serious progress on the Big Bold Ask in the first 2 years of the budget plan, with key investments made in full-day kindergarten, broadband internet access, early literacy, and Kentucky's state university system. The remaining components of the Big Bold Ask include needed investments in childcare, in preschool, and in a fund for teaching excellence. Recently, the Pritchard Committee and a team of statewide partners released a Fragile Ecosystem 4. Will Kentucky childcare survive when the dollars run out? A Fragile Ecosystem 4, a survey completed by over 500 of Kentucky's approximately 1,600 childcare providers, and from 95 out of 120 Kentucky counties, found that once federal American Rescue Plan relief dollars run out, over 70% of childcare providers said they'd be forced to raise tuition for working parents. 30% said they would have to lay off their staff, and 20% of childcare providers said they would permanently close their center. And currently, only about half of all Kentucky children arrive to kindergarten prepared, and Kentucky ranks 41st in the nation in the number of 3- and 4-year-olds enrolled in preschool, that being a fall from 28th in the nation back in 2008. So here's our question. How can Kentucky ensure more children access high-quality early learning?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, I guess, Ben. And I can tell you a couple examples of just what you said. I'm on the school board with a gentleman whose wife had run a daycare for 25, 30 years. The tornado came through here last year, destroyed her daycare, and she decided not to reopen. And they had upwards of 75, 80 kids in that one daycare. So that's just one example. I know Warren County Public Schools, we had a daycare in one of our high schools for teachers and students and different people. And we had to close it because of the lack of employees to keep the daycare open. So those are just a couple examples of what you're talking about. It is a major problem. I can tell you a couple of things that we're doing in Warren County Public Schools. We are offering full day, 4-day-a-week preschool to our 3- and 4-year-olds. So that's something that we're trying to do, not just a half-a-day preschool. We're offering all-day preschool, 4 days a week. Now, I know there's a grant that pays for part of that through the state, but we pick up the tab for the rest of it because we see the importance of having those kids in school. We know the importance of being able to read by the third grade. That's going to be a determining factor for success of that student. And so vocabulary and literacy at an early age are critical. We're trying to do everything we can within our means here in Warren County Public Schools. And I would try to even build on that at the state level and make those things available, hopefully, across the state of Kentucky.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you to Bowling Green for setting that wonderful example in early education. We certainly appreciate that.
Thank you.
So nationally, we hear a lot about teacher shortages. Even before the pandemic, we saw a decline in the number of students entering teacher prep programs, and even those with teaching credentials opting for a career outside of the classroom. Research shows that high-quality teaching is the surest way to grow education outcomes for students. So here's our question. How can state leaders work to ensure that Kentucky's best and brightest both remain in and enter the teaching profession? And what are some steps that can be taken to ensure quality teachers in each and every Kentucky classroom?
Well, I think you know as well as I do that the rock star teacher in that classroom is the most important factor to success. I mean, you can have a $1 million buildings, you can have all of the fancy stuff, but if you don't have a rock star teacher in that classroom, the students are going to suffer. So that's a great question, and wholeheartedly, I think the teacher in that classroom is the most important asset that we can give our students. I think there's 2 or 3 things that's happened probably, Ben. Respect for the teaching profession may have taken a hit in the last few years for some reason, and it's hard for me to understand as being a lifelong educator why people do not think teachers deserve all the respect in the world. So, you know, that could play into it. The retirement challenges that we've had with financing teacher retirement and then switching the retirement system over to a 401k, you know, those are probably some of the reasons, again, a small part of why people may choose not to go into teaching. I just read an article in the Bowling Green paper here yesterday. They're doing this with the nursing shortage here in this area. Western is offering in-state tuition for out-of-state students that want to go into the nursing program. You know, why could we not do something like that for teachers? You know, I have an example. A person I know that moved here with General Motors and worked at the Corvette plant. Their kids loved it here, but they had to transfer out, move back to Michigan. The kid wants to come back to Western Kentucky University, but they can't get in-state tuition now because they live in Michigan. So, you know, why could we not offer, like they're going to do nurses, why could we not offer that to those folks that want to go into teaching? If they live out of state, Western is known as used to be a teacher's college and has a great program. Why could we not offer in-state tuition maybe to those students from out of state that might want to come back to Kentucky and go into teacher education? So those are just a couple of examples of things that I think may have caused a problem in some of our best and brightest to go into education. Of course, you know, this is not the beginning of the problem with science and math teachers. We've had that problem for the last several years. If you have those degrees, they can go into the private sector and make more money than they can in education, if that's what they're after, is the money. So we've been losing those for several years, even when I was in education. So that's nothing new. So, you know, those are some things, again, I think we have to get our heads together and come up with some incentives to try to keep our best and brightest here and keep our best and brightest going into teacher education.
Well, very good. And thank you so much for sharing those experiences. You know, we've talked a bit today about the students, we've talked about the teachers. Next, we're going to talk about the curriculum. You know, when we think about a high school diploma, for example, it should be evidence that a student is ready to succeed after high school. Unfortunately, too many students today graduate diploma in hand without having mastered the knowledge and skills required to be successful in college, career, and in life. The Pritchard Committee community profiles for all school districts show the state graduation rate in Kentucky in 2021 at 90%. However, a state rate for meeting college readiness benchmarks in math, for example, was at 30%. And despite Kentucky ranking third in the nation in high school graduation, Kentucky ranks 44th in the nation in higher education attainment and in median household income. So here's our question. How can Kentucky ensure both rigorous and meaningful coursework and provide the support students need to successfully transition to their life after high school?
Well, again, another very good question, but a very difficult question. I can tell you here in Warren County, Ben, we have about an 80% career and college and career ready success rate of our students coming out of high school. And we feel pretty good about that. We want it to be 100%, but we're right at 80%. And a quality education, a lot of that goes back to what do you want to get out of this education and what do you put in it. But, you know, when you look at a grading scale, 60% is passing. There's a big difference in that student that passed and got their diploma with a 60% average than one that had 100% or a 95% average. So again, it goes back to, you know, we're going to have some students graduating from high school that probably are not going to be college ready, but maybe they can be technical ready. And I think we've got to turn this tide back. 20 years ago, when I was a guidance counselor in high school, our superintendent said, every kid's got to go to college, every kid, because they were getting pushed from the state. And my thought was always, every kid is not college material. Every kid is not college bound, but they could do something at the technical level, go to Sky CTC down here and get a 2-year degree and go out and start making money. So I think we've got to look at, not every kid is going to be college material, but every kid can be post-secondary material. And we've got to start using our vocational and technical schools again. We've got to have people to work on our heating and cooling. We've got to have the electricians and plumbers and those types of things. And I think maybe that tide's starting to turn a little bit at the state level. I hope it is, because that's got to be the direction that some of our students go.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for that response. You know, next we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about something that you mentioned earlier, and that's parental involvement. At the Pritchard Committee, we believe that a child's first, best, and most important teacher is their parent. But so often we hear that parents feel left out of the education policymaking process. So how can legislators work to engage parent voice earlier in the decision-making process?
Well, another good question, Ben. And I think some of this goes back to possibly consolidation of schools when we started taking schools out of small communities. Parents started to feel a little disconnect there. I know when I started the elementary school, my parents knew all the teachers, my teachers knew all the families in that community. And I'm afraid we've got a disconnect maybe as our communities have grown, and with consolidation of schools, we've lost that small community family feel that we had 30, 40 years ago. How do we get back to that? I don't have all the answers. I would like to study this. I would like to check into it. But I think there is a disconnect, like you said there. How can we get parents involved at a younger age? Again, maybe it's some type of incentive, because we definitely need to work together. Those parents want what's best for their kids. I can assure you the teachers and the school systems want what's best for those kids. And I'm sure the state legislature wants what's best for those kids. So we all have a common interest there. COVID kind of brought about some changes, some good, maybe some bad. But I think maybe parents and communities are starting to turn the corner a little bit on, we do need to work together more. It's not us versus them. It should be us pulling together for what's best for our students. And maybe if anything good came out of COVID, I know Zoom came out of COVID for me. So maybe something else good can come out of it as far as us working together at an earlier age, not when they start first grade, but at an earlier age. How can we bring communities, parents, and students together to help everybody?
Well, thank you so much. We certainly appreciate that answer as well. Believe it or not, we've already come to our last question today, and it's designed to give you the last word. So let's say there is a citizen in House District 20, and the sole reason why they're showing up to vote on election day is they want to put the needs of education, birth through post-secondary first. Why should that individual vote for you?
Well, I hope they'll look at my background, as we've talked about, my life in public service, my life in education. My goal being as a legislator would be to use common sense, legislate more from the middle. I think people are tired of this yelling from the right and yelling from the left, and nothing gets accomplished for the average person out there. And I'm a middle-class average person, married with 2 kids and 2 daughter-in-law and 4 small grandkids. So I want what's best for my kids and grandkids, just like everybody else out there wants what's best for their kids and grandkids. So I hope they'll keep that in mind. I hope serving with honor and integrity and that work ethic that I talked about that my parents had taught me many years ago. Again, it's a passion in life that I've had ever since I was an adult. And those are some of the things that I bring to the table. If elected, Ben, I would love to serve on the education committee in Frankfort. I have a good friend, Steve Riley's on there now. Steve and I graduated from high school together. We played baseball in high school together. I would love to serve on that education committee with him to try to come up and solve some of the problems. I think we can bring people together, think outside the box a little bit, still beg and borrow from other states what's working for them, bring that back to Kentucky. We have a good system, but all systems can be improved. And I know that's what you want at the Pritchard Committee. And that's what we want as Board of Education members here in Warren County. That's what we want as parents and grandparents. And I can assure you that nobody will work any harder for public education than Kevin Jackson will down here in District 20.
Well, thank you so much for that response and for all of the responses throughout today. For those watching the recording, you just heard from Kevin Jackson, a candidate for House District 20 in Warren County, Bowling Green. Earlier today, we heard from Representative Patti Minter, the incumbent in House District 20. We hope that this will provide those watching today an opportunity to compare and contrast, and again, be an informed, engaged voter. So thank you so much again, Candidate Jackson. We look forward to seeing how you and your opponent each fare on Election Day coming up here soon. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Ben. Appreciate you giving me an opportunity to share some ideas with you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much and have a good day.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll see you.